Nigeria's 200 million citizens, known for their entrepreneurial spirit, have long adapted to harsh conditions, often without reliable state services. They generate their own electricity, source their own water, and defend their communities when the armed forces fall short. They even negotiate with kidnappers when loved ones are taken. But now, their resilience is being pushed to the limit. Despite being Africa's largest economy after South Africa, years of military rule and poor economic management have led to prolonged stagnation, rising poverty, and the decline of public institutions. Human development indicators in Nigeria are comparable to those of the world's least developed countries, while widespread corruption has undermined public spending. Decades of insufficient investment have caused severe infrastructural bottlenecks, hindering private sector growth. Today, Nigeria is facing its worst economic crisis in a generation, resulting in widespread hardship and anger. A reliance on oil and gas, combined with rampant corruption, has plunged the nation into severe crisis. In this video, we'll explore the roots of Nigeria's economic challenges and their impact on the people. The current crisis in Nigeria stems from two significant policy changes implemented by President Tinubu: the partial removal of fuel subsidies and the floating of the currency. These actions have led to dramatic price increases, worsening the economic challenges faced by the country. Until recently, the Nigerian government heavily subsidized petroleum, spending nearly $10 billion last year, equivalent to 2.1% of GDP. For many Nigerians, this subsidy was one of the few tangible benefits provided by a government often viewed as neglectful and predatory. Although successive presidents pledged to eliminate the subsidy, they frequently backtracked due to fears of mass unrest. However, President Tinubu boldly announced the end of the fuel subsidy. This move, while intended to free up funds for critical sectors like healthcare and education, resulted in immediate and widespread pain. Petrol prices nearly tripled overnight in some areas, with transport costs quickly following suit. The sharp increase in fuel prices has driven up the cost of other goods, as businesses pass on higher transportation and energy expenses to consumers. As a result, inflation has surged to a 28-year high of 34%. The cost of staple foods such as rice has more than doubled in the past year. With over 87 million people already living below the poverty line, Nigeria, despite its vast oil wealth, is now witnessing an alarming rise in poverty levels. The World Bank warns that this trend is likely to continue, deepening the economic hardship for millions. The floating of the Naira has led to a sharp depreciation of the currency, dramatically driving up the cost of Nigeria's essential imports. With total imports valued at around $60.6 billion in 2023, spanning refined petroleum, vehicles, machinery, and food products, the weakened Naira has made these vital goods significantly more expensive. This surge in import costs has exacerbated inflation, further straining businesses and consumers and deepening the economic challenges that the country is grappling with. The story of Nigeria's economy cannot be told without addressing its vast resource wealth, particularly in petroleum. Discovered in 1956, petroleum has since become the lifeblood of the nation's economy, serving as the primary source of government revenue and foreign exchange. Nigeria stands among the top 10 oil exporters globally, with reserves estimated at 37 billion barrels. Additionally, the country is a major exporter of liquefied natural gas, contributing 13% to its total exports. Beyond oil, Nigeria is rich in tin, coal, iron ore, zinc, and fertile agricultural land. Yet despite this abundance, Nigeria's economy remains dangerously dependent on crude oil, which accounts for over 90% of export earnings and more than half of government revenue. This heavy reliance leaves the economy highly susceptible to fluctuations in global oil prices and production levels. When oil prices are high, government revenues swell, but when prices drop, Nigeria is forced to borrow to cover the cost of running the government. These loans often come with high interest rates, leading to a growing public debt burden. By 2023, Nigeria's debt-to-GDP ratio was estimated at 38.8%, with interest expenditures consuming nearly 42% of government revenues. This elevated interest burden diverts critical funds away from essential services such as healthcare, education, and poverty alleviation, exacerbating the challenges faced by millions of Nigerians living below the poverty line. While oil and gas revenues sustain the government, they contribute a mere 10% to the nation's GDP, with the majority of the population engaged in non-oil sectors like agriculture, trade, and services. Unfortunately, these non-oil sectors, particularly agriculture and manufacturing, have been stifled by years of neglect and competition from more efficient global industries. Nigeria's manufacturing base is weak, leading to persistent foreign exchange shortages and an import bill that current export earnings struggle to cover. The overdependence on oil revenues extends to Nigeria's 36 states, where aside from Lagos and Ogun, most rely heavily on federal oil transfers to fund their budgets. Efforts to diversify the economy, as outlined in various national development plans, aimed to reduce this reliance on oil, but progress has been limited. As a result, Nigeria remains vulnerable to external shocks, with job creation lagging far behind the needs of a country where over 80 million people live below the poverty line. These challenges have stunted economic growth, leaving the nation in a precarious position as it struggles to develop a more balanced and resilient economy. But the challenges don't end there. The very foundation of Nigeria's economic engine, its oil industry, is now showing signs of severe strain. A chief economist at Shell once described Nigeria as the jewel in the crown of the oil majors' empire. Yet in recent years, this jewel has lost its luster. Early this year, Shell, which has been pumping oil in Nigeria for nearly 7 decades, agreed to sell its onshore subsidiary to a consortium of mostly local companies. Other oil firms are packing up too. In February, Total Energies, a French group, announced plans to offload its stake in Shell's Nigerian subsidiary, joining a long list of firms, including Chevron, ExxonMobil, Eni, and Equinor, that have shed Nigerian assets in the past few years. This wave of divestments has sparked anxiety in Nigeria, raising fears that its most vital industry is in terminal decline. For decades, Nigeria has been Africa's biggest oil exporter, yet production has slumped by nearly 50% from its peak in 2005 due to onshore insecurity and rising offshore costs. Further challenges loom as the global green transition threatens to reduce demand for oil. Despite efforts to diversify Nigeria's economy, oil still accounts for over 80% of exports and roughly 50% of the government budget. Most of these oil majors are withdrawing from the Niger Delta, the southern swamplands that harbor the majority of Nigeria's onshore and shallow water oil rigs. The Delta has long been plagued by kidnappings, oil theft, sabotage, and crumbling infrastructure. Operating there, the majors argue, is simply not worth the risk. In theory, extracting a barrel of Nigerian oil should cost about $15 on average, but the reality is far different. Insecurity in the Delta has driven up costs and pushed investment into offshore waters, where production costs are higher. As a result, it costs between $25 and $40 to pump a barrel of oil in Nigeria. This high-cost structure will make it increasingly difficult for Nigeria to compete with producers like Saudi Arabia, where costs are below $5 a barrel, especially as global demand and prices fall. Nigeria's heavy dependence on oil has left its economy vulnerable to external shocks and rising debt, while the declining oil industry further exacerbates these challenges. As the nation grapples with these economic strains, another critical issue has emerged: the currency crisis. Nigeria's currency crisis has plunged the Naira to unprecedented lows, depreciating nearly 30% against the US dollar since 2019. This dramatic devaluation is severely impacting both multinational corporations and consumer-focused businesses within the country. For example, MTN, a South African telecommunications giant with its largest market in Nigeria, has projected a staggering 60 to 80% drop in group profits this month due to the Naira's collapse. Consumer-oriented multinationals are also grappling with the fallout. Unilever, GSK, and PZ Cussons, along with local firms, have been significantly affected. Unilever halted production of key home care and skin cleansing products last year, attributing the decision to the challenges posed by the foreign exchange crisis. GSK's Nigerian affiliate scaled back operations, shifting to third-party distribution, a pattern mirrored by many other multinational companies. Historically, Nigeria's oil wealth provided a reliable influx of dollars, stabilizing the Naira and often making imports more cost-effective than local production. However, a steep decline in oil production over the past 2 decades, coupled with the absence of alternative revenue streams, has created a severe shortage of hard currency. This scarcity has led to widespread panic buying of dollars, further intensifying the Naira's woes. In a bid to address this, President Bola Tinubu eased long-standing foreign exchange restrictions in May 2023, aiming to attract foreign investment and restore economic stability. However, this policy shift resulted in a 70% devaluation of the Naira and a surge in inflation to a 28-year high, precipitating a cost-of-living crisis that threatens the stability of Africa's most populous nation. The Naira's continued depreciation highlights the broader economic challenges Nigeria faces, including plummeting oil prices, shrinking external reserves, and an escalating demand for foreign currency. Issues that are further compounded by a level of corruption so pervasive that it exacerbates the nation's financial instability. Nigeria's struggle with corruption is a deep-seated issue that has persisted since the oil boom of the 1970s. Despite the efforts of 23 anti-corruption agencies, their traditionally independent operations hinder the effectiveness of their collective impact. One notable manifestation of this issue is the phenomenon of ghost workers, individuals who appear on government payrolls but do not actually work. For example, a recent story highlighted a taxi driver in London who had been drawing a civil service salary in Nigeria for 2 years. This problem persists despite several crackdowns, with thousands of non-existent workers reportedly still receiving salaries due to inadequate checks and balances. The Nigerian civil service has long been plagued by inefficiencies, including an oversized and poorly remunerated workforce. Rapid recruitment under military regimes resulted in a bloated and under-skilled workforce where many employees lacked the necessary technical skills. For instance, about 70% of workers in the Ministry of Finance were low-level clerks and administrative staff with only a secondary school education, while only 13% were university graduates, and just 8% had degrees relevant to economics, finance, or accounting. Additionally, civil servants generally received low pay but enjoyed various fringe benefits, such as free housing and vehicles, which often leads to waste and misuse of government resources. Weak management and oversight further exacerbated the problem of ghost workers, with unreliable personnel and pension registers compounding the issue. The lack of a strong incentive structure contributed to poor work ethics and subpar service delivery, often accompanied by hidden or outright corrupt behavior. Corruption and poor governance have significantly impeded growth and public service delivery in Nigeria. Corruption distorts the business environment and acts as a hidden tax on private investments. In a corrupt setting, resources intended for human capital and essential investments, such as infrastructure, health, and education, are often misappropriated. This misallocation occurs through various means, including procurement fraud, patronage for service access, absenteeism, and misuse of facilities. The pervasive corruption and poor governance have thus created a cycle of inefficiency and instability, underscoring the urgent need for comprehensive reforms to address both the symptoms and root causes of Nigeria's economic challenges. Nigeria's ongoing economic crisis is a complex and multifaceted challenge, rooted in decades of mismanagement, over-reliance on oil, and pervasive corruption. The recent policy shifts under President Tinubu, including the removal of fuel subsidies and currency floating, have only intensified the hardship faced by millions of Nigerians. Despite the nation's vast natural resources, these issues have left the economy vulnerable and its people struggling with unprecedented levels of poverty and inflation. If you found this analysis insightful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth content on pressing global issues. I have been your host, Albert. Until next time.